Well, good afternoon, everybody. Let me also join the chorus of all those who are expressing their gratitude to our hosts. Thank you so very much. And I told Chris, you know, it takes me 5 minutes just to take a breath, so I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'll try my very best. As you heard, I just want to mention, since we're dealing with archives, that for 26 years I was the executive director, now emeritus, of the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives, located on the campus of Hebrew Union College. We believe it's the largest catalog collection of documentary evidence on the history of Jewish life in America. So I begin. Before I'm bringing to you really what is the most famous, well-known document related to the Revolution and the beginning of the Republic, and that's the letter that George Washington wrote to the Jews of Newport. But permit me, if I can, to just set the context so you have a sense of why this letter is not only important to the Jewish community, but I think arguably is truly a great American document. I was thrilled, by the way, when I got here last night. We had a welcome dinner for the panelists, and the vice president of Brigham Young spoke to us on work that he's doing in research, and there he is. He's talking about not only the letter to the Jews of Newport, but also some of the other letters. I'll get into that. But I wasn't upset at all, because I'm going to go in a little different venue. So let me begin by pointing out that the Jews look to America as an exception. And this exception is not the kind of exceptionalism that we talk about when we speak about American exceptionalism. Jewish exceptionalism means, and I'm doing this as quickly as I can, that in all of diaspora, in all of the history of Jews wandering outside their ancient homeland, there has never been a more commodious place for the Jew than the United States of America. That's what we mean when we talk about American exceptionalism. The Jews come to this country by accident, in community. In 1654, let me go back one if I can. They are 23 men, women, and children were down in Curacao. They were, they were in Pernambuco. They were in Brazil, in a Dutch colony, and they're going back after the Portuguese and the Dutch and the Brazilians retake Pernambuco. They get on a boat. They want to go back to Amsterdam, and they end up, can't get into why and how, but they end up in New Amsterdam. And when they arrive in New Amsterdam, they're immediately told, we're going to put you on the next boat back to Amsterdam. But they want to stay. They're impoverished. And they get permission to stay from the Dutch West Indies Company. Now, that means that, and this is important, there is no other example in all of diaspora history where the Jewish community is in place preceding the beginning of the Republic. And that's very important. Now, by the time of the Revolution, there are 5 functioning Jewish congregations, though we're talking about a very small population, maybe 0.1% of the people in the colonies. And as you can see, they're located in 5 places: Newport, New York, Philadelphia, Charleston, and Savannah. And if you want to know why not Boston, which is so old, it's because Jews needed to be in port cities so that they could do their merchandising, and they also needed to be in a place where they had the greatest latitude for religious freedom, where they were not going to be molested. Now, in this period, Jews were permitted to, there was never a time in all of colonial history where Jews were forced to live in a ghetto. We'll have to see what happens in our own day and age, but we've never had any kind of pogroms against Jews in this country. And so to sum it up as quickly as I can in this setting, in the colonial period, Jews had many, many wonderful rights. They could do business, they could live where they want, they could interact with people. There were also many disabilities. Very often they had to pay church taxes, even though it wasn't for them. They also couldn't hold office or any honorific office and so forth. So they were with one leg in a world that they loved, that was very open to them, and in another leg there were still disabilities. Now, when the Constitution is written, there's a sixth congregation that comes into existence, and that's in Richmond, Virginia. There you have it. Now, after the victory at Yorktown, and then eventually the Treaty of Paris that's signed in 1783, you know that immediately, pretty much, we have movement towards the establishment of a constitution that will give the federal government ability to handle matters of economic issues, interstate disputes, national defense, and so forth. But I want to mention the Articles of Confederation, which nobody has really talked about, but were put into place as the war breaks out. And the Articles of Confederation are so very important because they're all secular. There's not even the year of our Lord is mentioned in the Articles of Confederation. So as this new constitution is being shaped, the Jewish community is concerned. They would like to know, what is exactly going to happen, the Articles of Confederation. And so the community meets, and the convention begins. And I'd like to just point out that which I think was already said, and that is that at this constitutional convention, there were some of the patriots who were ready to envision a nation that didn't have one religious tradition. I would say that, as far as my studies have taught me, all of the patriots were interested in freedom of conscience, or at one sort or another, but not everyone believed that a nation could exist without the people all ascribing themselves to one religious tradition. So you have people like Jefferson and Madison, as we've heard, who did, but then you had people like Patrick Henry and others who felt they didn't want to molest other people, but they did feel that there had to be a unifying religious tradition. So this is why this man, Jonas Phillips, who was at the time the president of the Philadelphia Jewish Congregation, he writes to George Washington in the middle of the convention. He writes a very famous letter, and in essence he asks Washington, and you can find this letter on the internet. It's at the National Archives. A very famous letter. He says, "I'm asking the convention on behalf of myself, on behalf of my children, on behalf of the 13 colonies filled that have where Jews may one day live, give us equal footing under the law." He didn't know when he wrote this letter that they had already debated this and they had voted on it, and the decision to separate, if you will, or to give religious freedom of conscience in place was already decided. But this gives you an indication of the concern that the Jewish community had, and that's what brings me, in a sense, to the Constitution itself. The Constitution, of course, is passed by the convention, but then it has to go out to the states for ratification. And the first state, if you've ever seen the license plate, is Delaware. That is the first to sign up onto the Constitution. And then, of course, you have to have at least 9 of the 13 colonies have to agree to the states. And you see that by the time of June 1788, you have 9, New Hampshire, And that means the Constitution is going to go into effect, and Washington is going to become, in early 1789, the president, and he sets about, as soon as he is installed as president, he's inaugurated in April of 1789, he begins making tours, goodwill tours, to different parts of the new nation so that he can unify the nation. And, of course, as the new president, this man who's sort of a demigod, he receives letters of congratulations from so many different groups, including so many of the different religious traditions that are here with us today. And just to give you an idea, he gets letters from a letter from the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Churches. He gets a letter from the Roman Catholics. He gets a letter from the United Baptist Church. He gets a letter from the annual meeting of the Quakers. He gets a letter from the directors of the Society of the United Brethren for the propagating of the gospel among the heathens. He gets a letter from the chiefs and counselors of the Seneca Nation, and even the Virginia, the Virgin's Fair and the Matron's Grave of Trenton, New Jersey, and many, many more. Now I'm going to give you, there were probably between 1,500 and 2,000 Jews in the United States at that time. I'm going to give you a guess at how many letters this community sends to Washington. And if you guess 1,500 or 2,000, that's a good guess, because that's typically what we would do, because nobody speaks for us except us. But actually, embarrassingly, four different letters. And I'm just going to concentrate today on what I consider to be the most important, and now we finally will get to the Jews of Newport. Now, you all know that Rhode Island was the very last state to join the Union and to become part of the Republic. And after that happens, Rhode Island, there's many reasons for that, but I can't stop now. So when that happens, which happens, they join in early 1790, Washington makes plans to go up and to do one of his tours up to Rhode Island, up to Newport. And when he arrives, he is welcomed by various representatives of the community, and the president of the Jewish congregation reads a letter to him. And this is what I want to focus on, because the other letters that were sent to Washington, we do not have the exact wording of the letter or of the presentation that was made to Washington. Only the Newport letter do we have the actual text. And I want to quickly go into that now. The text was delivered by what we would call today the president of that congregation. I don't know, maybe there were 30 people in this congregation. His name was Moses Satius, and Satius was a prominent businessman in Newport, and he writes this letter, which he reads to the president when he's in Newport, and then he hands the letter to him. So very quickly, you see this is the letter from the Library of Congress. That Satius, you see his name signed at the bottom. And I just very quickly, I'm going to read to you the most important thing. I can't go over all the letter, but you see how they begin. Permit the children of the stock of Abraham to approach you with the most cordial affection. They don't start with the words, let the Jews of Newport, let the Israelites of Newport, let the Hebrews of Newport. They do this deliberately. And if you think that Moses Satius sat down and just simply wrote this letter out and then read it to the president, I'm sure you're wrong, because this probably was worked on for weeks and weeks in advance of the arrival to make sure they communicate. Why the children of Abraham? To emphasize that we're all connected religiously. Because remember, friends, that the Jews were really the only outsiders. Because all these other groups, even the Quakers and so forth, we're all part of the Christian milieu, even if you were a dissenter. Now, I must read to you the next paragraph, which is the most important paragraph, which many people are not familiar with what it says. The next paragraph that I want to read to you in this letter is, deprived as we heretofore have been for the invaluable rights of free citizens. And we really don't know what they're referring to here. Is he referring to America? Is he referring to the history of the Jew? I don't know. With a deep sense of gratitude to the almighty disposer of events, we behold a government erected by the majesty of the people. Now hear this. A government which to bigotry gives no sanction, to persecution no assistance, but generously affording to all liberty of conscience, immunities of citizenship, deeming everyone of whatever nation, tongue, or language equal part in the great governmental machine. So ample and extensive a federal union whose basis is philanthropy, mutual confidence, and public virtue, we cannot but acknowledge to be the work of the great God who ruleth over the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth, doing whatsoever seemeth him good. What I'm saying here is this is a question put in a sense of a question in a statement. In other words, we are living, President Washington, in a country that gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. What's not there is correct. Am I right? So when you see, and this is what Dr. Collins spoke about yesterday, this is the copybook. There were 2 letters that Washington wrote to the Jews in response, thanking them. One which is in private hands, and then the copybook which is in the Library of Congress, but it's signed by Washington, which is very rare. And as you see, Washington now writing back, and this is what Dr. Collins emphasized, he literally restates and actually strengthens rhetorically Moses Satius, or the Jews' line. Washington gets credit for it, but the Jewish community put it in his mouth. This is a government which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. And then, as Dr. Collins said, and with this I will end, Dr. Collins, who spoke to us, made this very important point. Washington gives them then, in this paragraph, in the first line, what they didn't even dream of. All they wanted to know is that this is going to be a nation which gives them the freedom to pursue their religious tradition. That's all they wanted. And if you see, he says in this letter, Washington, he says, all possess the liberty of conscience and immunity of citizenship. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of. And this is what Dr. Collins spoke about last night, meaning it's not because we who are in the majority are giving this to you, because we're tolerating you, we're making room for you. You're part of the citizenry. You're one of the people. And this is a God-given, he won't use that word, we heard about that from Dr. Kidd, but he's not going to say God-given, he says it's if you will, it's a native natural right. Well, we feel that this is something so very important to America, perhaps in light of what you were talking about. I'm not sure everybody knows that once again we had a bombing in a very beautiful synagogue at which I've spoken today. It's happening as we're meeting, so I don't know all the details, but it seems like, at least before I spoke, it didn't seem like anybody was injured. But at any rate, this letter reminds us, our first president, the only president to be actually appointed unanimously, this is what he believed, so that should be implanted in the hearts of every American. Thank you very much.